Azure Cost Optimization, 6 Strategies Startups Use to Cut Spend. Hey, welcome. In this video, we're breaking down Azure Cost Optimization, 6 Strategies Startups Use to Cut Spend. Let's get into it. Let's talk about moving on to why Azure costs spiral out of control for startups. Most startup Azure bills don't blow up because of a single bad decision. They balloon gradually, from a dozen small ones made under deadline pressure. The most common culprits are over-provisioned virtual machines, forgotten dev and test environments running 24/7, and data egress charges no one anticipated. Storage costs sneak up too. The default blob redundancy setting is geo-redundant storage, which costs about 40% more than locally redundant storage. If your dev environment doesn't need cross-region replication, you're paying for protection you don't use. Pay-as-you-go pricing is also naturally expensive for steady-state workloads. It's designed for unpredictability, which means you pay a premium for the flexibility. Once your workload patterns stabilize, that premium becomes waste. Now, let's talk about strategy 1, right-size your VMs to cut Azure spend. Right-sizing is the single highest ROI action most startups can take. The average startup runs VMs at 10 to 20% CPU utilization. At that level, you're paying for 4 cores when one would do. Azure offers the B-Series burstable VMs specifically for workloads with low average CPU but occasional spikes, including web servers, dev environments, and CI agents. AB2S costs about $35 per month. A D4S v3 running the same app costs around $175 per month. If you have 5 VMs you could downsize, that's $700 per month saved with no code changes. The process is simple: pull the CPU and memory utilization data for the past 30 days from Azure Monitor, and identify any VM averaging below 30% CPU. Downsize in a test environment first, run it for a week, then promote to production. Next up, let's talk about strategy 2, reserved instances versus pay-as-you-go for predictable workloads. Reserved instances cut VM costs by 40 to 60% compared to pay-as-you-go pricing for workloads that run continuously. This is one of the most impactful Azure cost optimization moves available, and it requires no engineering work. Here's how it works: you commit to using a specific VM type in a specific Azure region for 1 or 3 years. In exchange, Microsoft gives you a significant discount. A 1-year reservation for a D2S v3 in East US runs about $57 per month compared to $87 per month pay-as-you-go. A 3-year reservation drops it further to around $40 per month. For a startup running 5 such VMs continuously, the annual savings from 1-year reservations alone is roughly $1,800. The key question is predictability. Pay-as-you-go makes sense for development environments, one-off batch jobs, and anything you spin up for a few hours. Azure reserved instances make sense for anything you run 24/7 for months. Next up, moving on to strategy 3, use Azure Advisor for automatic cost recommendations. Azure Advisor is a free service that analyzes your actual usage patterns and produces specific, actionable cost reduction recommendations. Most startups enable it once and then forget it exists. That's a mistake. Advisor checks for underutilized virtual machines, idle load balancers, unattached managed disks, and redundant application gateway instances. It quantifies the potential savings for each recommendation, so you can prioritize by impact. To access it, go to the Azure portal, search Advisor, and click the Cost tab. You'll see a list of recommendations ranked by estimated monthly savings. Act on the top 3 each week. This takes about 20 minutes and often yields $100 to $500 per month in savings for a mid-size startup. Now, next up, strategy 4, set up Azure budget alerts before you need them. This is the strategy most startups skip until they get burned. Azure budget alerts don't stop spending, but they tell you when you're on track to exceed a threshold so you can act before the month ends. Setting one up takes under 5 minutes. In Azure Cost Management, create a budget for your subscription or a specific resource group. Set thresholds at 80% and 100% of your monthly target. Configure email alerts to go to whoever reviews the Azure bill. Done. The more useful addition is action groups. When a budget threshold triggers, you can automatically run an Azure Automation Runbook or Logic app. Common uses: shut down non-production VMs, send a Slack notification, or page the engineering lead. This turns a passive alert into an active response. Microsoft's step-by-step tutorial on creating budgets in Azure Cost Management covers the full setup process. Next up, Strategy 5, eliminate idle resources every sprint. Every engineering team accumulates idle Azure resources. It's not carelessness, it's just how development works. A developer spins up a VM to test something, the ticket gets closed, the VM stays running. A load balancer gets provisioned for a feature that never shipped. A public IP address gets reserved and never assigned. Each of these costs money. Unattached managed disks run about $5 to $15 per month each. Public IP addresses cost $3.65 per month. Idle load balancers cost $18 to $25 per month. Individually trivial, but across a team of 10 engineers over a year, this typically adds up to $3,000 to $8,000 in pure waste. The fix is a recurring cleanup habit, not a one-time audit. Add a cloud resource cleanup item to your sprint retrospective. Whoever last touched a resource is responsible for deciding if it's still needed. Pairing this with Azure DevOps CI/CD pipelines that auto-tag resources with the creating user and the associated ticket means ownership is never ambiguous. Let's talk about Strategy 6, optimize Azure storage tiers and data egress costs. Storage costs look small until they don't. The three things that catch startups off guard are hot storage for cold data, geo-redundant storage where locally redundant is sufficient, and data egress charges for traffic leaving Azure. On storage tiers, Azure Blob Storage has three access tiers: hot, cool, and archive. Hot costs about $0.018/GB/month. Cool costs about $0.01/GB/month. Archive costs about $0.002/GB/month. If you're storing log files, database backups, or user-uploaded content that's rarely accessed, moving it to Cool or Archive can cut those storage costs by 40 to 90%. Azure Lifecycle Management policies do this automatically based on last access date. Set it up once. On redundancy, LRS keeps 3 copies within a single data center. GRS keeps 6 copies across 2 regions. LRS costs about $0.018/GB/month. GRS costs about $0.035/GB/month. For dev/test storage, log archives, or anything you could recreate if a data center failed, use LRS. Next up, what Azure infrastructure costs look like at each startup stage. One of the biggest gaps in Azure cost content is concrete benchmarks. What should you actually pay? The honest answer is it depends heavily on workload type, but the table below gives realistic ranges based on common startup architectures. These are rough ranges. A startup running heavy machine learning workloads at the MVP stage can easily spend $2,000 per month on GPU compute alone. A SaaS business with mostly static content and a small database can run under $300 per month at $1 million ARR. The benchmarks matter because Azure cost optimization isn't just about cutting costs in absolute terms. It's about spending in proportion to the revenue and workload the infrastructure supports. If you're spending $8,000 per month at $200,000 ARR, that's worth investigating. If you're spending $8,000 per month at $3 million ARR, that's healthy. Next up, let's talk about conclusion. Azure cost optimization doesn't require a dedicated FinOps team or expensive third-party tooling. The 6 strategies covered here are things any startup engineer can implement in a few hours. Combined, they routinely cut Azure bills by 30 to 50% without touching a line of application code. The best time to build these habits is before you have a cost problem. Set up budget alerts on day 1. Tag every resource from the start. Review Advisor weekly. Add cloud cleanup to your sprint cadence. These small habits compound over months. If you're not sure where your biggest waste is hiding, start with the Azure Cost Management Dashboard and Advisor. Spend 30 minutes there and you'll almost certainly find $200 to $500 per month in quick wins. For teams looking to go further, our post on Azure Cloud Services, 5 Quick Wins for Startups and SMBs covers additional optimization angles across networking, security, and managed services. Pick 2 strategies from this list and implement them before your next billing cycle closes.